Back in 2015, I experienced a strong Genesis revival, more like a fever, an obsession. My only album at the time was a CDR copy of Disc 3 from their 1967-1975 box set, so I decided to actually purchase their entire discography, one CD at a time, avoiding the dreadful sounding 2007 remasters, going for the 1994 series. Things were never easy to me. Peace of mind was hard to find. Every album was a great discovery into one of the best British bands ever, with me liking both the Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins eras. But the one album that was never available in stores was the 15th piece of the catalog. It had a sort of Love Beach fame amongst progressive rock fans who warned me not to get it. They called it the worst Genesis album with, quote, some random guy singing. This spiked my curiosity into finding out for myself, as I wasn't a big fan of the filler material in We Can Dance, which I thought was preachy and long. And then it happened. I found a CD copy of Calling All Stations at a local record fair, and the seller was indeed surprised. I bought it. Some collectors witnessed my purchase and said, quote, that's the biggest piece of shit Genesis ever laid down on tape. I smiled and told them, worse than 1983's Illegal Alien? I don't think so. Nobody replied, and I said maybe the album has an invisible touch, yeah? Got home and sat down to experience the infamous Calling All Stations. The first song sounded like one of the best James Bond tracks ever made. I was sold on the heavy guitar crunch. How the hell was this not part of a movie? Its production values reminded me of the 1997's GoldenEye video game soundtrack, which shaped a big part of my teenage years. I firmly believe Calling All Stations should have been the theme song for Tomorrow Never Dies. It's the kind of track that can convince you to quit a job you hate without a severance package, just leaving everything behind. A powerful musical statement of postmodern survival in a world of shattered dreams. As I delved deep into the album, I recognized some of its flaws, but they were overshadowed by the fresh sounding mix and heartfelt vocals that had some of the Peter Gabriel darkness to them. Track 2, Congo, was stuck in my head for weeks. It felt like a return to the early 80s vibes of Genesis, away from Invisible Touch, yeah, and the greatest hits package of the band's 5 most popular songs in Spotify. Calling All Stations' sinister album cover was cool, with echoes of 1978's And Then There Were Three. That was very much appreciated after the Physician's Waiting Room / Christian church advertising vibes of We Can Dance. My mind walked circles trying to understand the context for this uncollinsed record, with a sort of in-through-the-outdoor magic to it, as it was made against all odds. Sunday, August 24th, 1997. I was 9 years old, and Genesis was about to take the stage for the first time in almost 5 years. Berlin's television tower hosted the event, filled with bloodthirsty journalists waiting to judge every second of one of the strangest and most misunderstood chapters in the band's history. Outside of the elephant in the room being Phil's absence, there was our protagonist, 29-year-old Ray Wilson, dealing with one of the worst presenters ever, whom I suspect was a hardcore Phil Collins fan, with fake charm and shallow disrespectful questions. It seemed this man was trying to make fun of a great singer, who, as we will see, got served a raw deal. For all the critics and fans who thought Genesis' We Can Dance sounded too much like a Phil Collins solo record, 1997 was a great opportunity to see a different version of the band, with Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks taking lead songwriting positions. This is the story of Genesis' final studio creation that will reveal the motivations behind the group's 8th lineup. We will also look at the events that led up to great potential, distorted by the inevitable expectations of past glories. Maybe they couldn't dance after all, and angry fans pointed fingers asking, who done it? But one thing's for sure, it wasn't Ray Wilson's fault. This is the making of Genesis, Calling All Stations. Our story begins with the now demolished Universal Amphitheater in Universal City, California. It was a busy year for the venue with 135 performances. Emerson, Lake and Palmer played here on August 28th that year during the Black Moon Tour. Genesis took the stage at the Billboard Awards ceremony on Tuesday, December 8th, 1992. Two cuts from their new album thrilled the audience in the ways of a live take of I Can't Dance and a half playback version of No Son of Mine. Yeah, the instrumental is a backing track on this one, and it's quite normal for award shows. The We Can't Dance effect was absolute. It remains the band's best-selling album at approximately 15 million copies. Hype was real. The music was everywhere, from dentist offices to shopping malls. This album was a hit. Now, the worst seller in Genesis' catalog, you ask? Well, believe it or not, that would be Nursery Crime. Despite a dangerous band hiatus after Invisible Touch, their comeback was a lucrative venture in a competitive market next to U2's Zoo TV, Guns N' Roses, and Metallica. It probably helped that Phil Collins' 138-date Seriously Live tour of 1990 created enough momentum for the public to buy any Genesis product that sounded like Phil Collins, the solo artist. It's basically the Sussudio and Invisible Touch scenario all over again. Genesis' new album managed to score the number 7 position for sales figures in 1991, beating both Guns N' Roses records and just one step behind Pearl Jam's 10. Their Billboard Award spot was their last 1992 date after a highly successful tour of 62 concerts. Fun fact, but it's more like a sad fact. The Universal Amphitheater was used for Toto's Jeff Porcaro tribute concert just 6 days after, on December 14th, 1992. September 18th, 1993, Genesis was a part of a charity concert next to Queen's own Roger Taylor and John Deacon, Pink Floyd, and Eric Clapton. Think of it as a small version of Knebworth 1990, held at Cowdray Castle in West Sussex, England. Tracks performed that day were Turn It On Again, Hold On My Heart, I Can't Dance, and Invisible Touch, Unbeknownst to both casual and hardcore Genesis fans, this would be the last time that Mike Rutherford, Phil Collins, and Tony Banks' incarnation of the band would play together until May 12, 2007, some 13 years and 7 months later. Now, at the time of playing this show, Collins was a month away from releasing his 5th studio album, Both Sides, which was recorded at Genesis' own studio, The Farm, with Collins himself playing all instruments. Phil would later say it was at this moment when he felt, quote, uncomfortable for the first time. I felt like an actor playing somebody else's part. His second marriage was falling apart, and the divorce would be finalized by 1996. It was not the best state of mind to sing Hold On My Heart over media allegations that Phil himself later admitted he had an affair with a woman he almost married back in the day, Lavinia Lang. Collins' marriage to Jill Tavelman in 1984 happened during Phil's rise to megastardom, Genesis included. Fun fact, Robert Plant played at Phil's wedding. Collins was ready for a change in 1994 when he embarked on a promotional Both Sides tour of 165 dates. His biggest solo concert run of all time began on April 1st in the Netherlands, with an end date May 16, 1995 in the Philippines. Collins played all the available concert markets: North America, Europe, Australia, Japan, Latin America, South Africa, and Asia. Despite his worldwide coverage of the touring circuits, at age 43, Both Sides sold less copies than all his previous albums at the time. Maybe record buyers didn't feel Collins the way they used to. Both Sides is a great sounding album with much attention to detail and a very passionate delivery. The problem here is that it sounds like a best of Phil Collins collection, but don't be fooled. It's one of his best works, and I think it's a much more consistent album than We Can't Dance. Maybe it was released too soon after Genesis, who knows, but every artist has to face the commercial turning point where fans want a live show instead of a new studio album. Levi Strauss hired British musician Peter Lawler in 1994 to write a song or jingle for one of their 501 Jeans ads. Peter looked for vocalists before choosing Scottish singer Ray Wilson of a still unknown band at the time, Stiltskin. Wilson was born in September 1968, just 1 month after the first Genesis lineup recorded their Jonathan King-produced debut album, From Genesis to Revelation. Peter Lawler played all the instruments on the Levi's commissioned composition by the name of Inside. Levi's ad was released with the title of Creek and was praised by its design. Wanting to capitalize on Inside's good fortune after it hit the number 5 spot on the UK singles chart in April 1994, the idea of an album was just natural. The single kept gaining traction in Europe, charting many countries, so Peter Lawler on guitars had an idea. He would write a full album worth of material and record it with Ray Wilson's band Stillskin, who had no discography entries at the time. With James Finnegan on bass and keyboards plus Ross McFarlane on drums, the quartet released an 11-track journey on October 17, 1994 by the name of The Mind's Eye. This was just 2 days after Phil Collins played Sheffield Arena. Stillskin's 1994 tour saw them play 23 dates in both the UK and Europe. Now, is the album any good? You be the judge.
Under advice, you take it. Don't be afraid. Old curtains, broken chairs, I walking through. Dust on the wooden stairs. When time was new, long days and laughing eyes. Walk through the field into a room. Old curtains, broken chairs. You gotta be like me. You gotta change from me. You gotta smile to me. You gotta America. America. You spoke without conceit. I had too much. We'll be together.
Mike Rutherford went back to Mike and the Mechanics to record their 4th album, Beggar on a Beach of Gold, spawning 3 moderately successful singles. The record was released on March 6, 1995, and the band played 46 concerts throughout Europe, plus a couple of dates in both the United States and South Africa. It was their first tour since 1989. Tony Banks was also back at the farm throughout 1994 and 1995 to record the only album of Strictly Inc., a short-lived project next to Jack Hughes of One Chong fame. The album was released in the UK only on September 11th, 1995. The album featured a similar Genesis and Phil Collins phase, Daryl Stuermer on guitars, bass legend Nathan East, and John Robinson on drums, whose work can be heard on countless studio albums, including Michael Jackson's Rock With You. He came up with the intro for that song, by the way. Now, this was Tony Banks' last solo project of sorts until his orchestral endeavors of 2004, which I definitely recommend. Strictly Inc. didn't go on tour, and Banks stayed home, enjoying the vacation period past Genesis' latest frenzy. As you'd think, this record is severely underrated, and it deserves to be revisited. Production-wise, this is a pivotal collection of songs and drum sounds that makes Calling All Stations something of a sequel to Strictly Inc. Tony Banks managed to create a modern landscape while retaining the signature aesthetic that made him famous. I believe this is one of the lost Genesis albums. While solo career fame eluded him, Tony Banks is the soul of Genesis. His unmistakable keyboard sounds on Strictly Inc. make you wonder why this wasn't further developed into a live band. It's a must-own album for any 80s prog fan out there. I'll sure grab a copy of it, and I'm sure I'm in the minority who loves every bit of Tony's diverse solo career. There's a John Paul Jones component to Tony Banks. Where Mike Rutherford and Phil Collins get all the press, Banks' albums confirm who the sonic architect really was in Genesis. Contrary to Weekend Dance, Strictly Inc. is a vibrant record where Banks poured his imagination and then some. It's a hard-hitting Banks statement. Ray Wilson and Stillskin went back on the road in 1995 for an 11-day tour of Virgin and Tower Records stores, plus 4 festival appearances, in Netherlands, Denmark, and Austria. The band's future was uncertain, and as much as they wanted to cash in the Levi Jeans fame for their hit single, it was not an eternal flame.
Swing low in a dark glass hour, turn color, see it turn to dust. Move on a stone dark night, we take to flight, snowfall tips. If you believe it, don't keep it all inside. No, 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 leave it all inside. No. Thank you. And the itchy smile as I take a mile from the longing. And we form a chain in the fleeting rain as I leave them. Marino skin made of hell. Marino skin shedding now. Keep coming here for now. Marino skin. Swing low in a dark glass hour, you turn and cower, see it turn to dust. Move on a stone dark night, we take to flight, snowfall turns to rust. It's if you think that I don't make too much sense. It's if you think that I don't make too much sense. That's because I'm broken-minded.
The Genesis Trio future was fading lights. A group meeting ended with Collins leaving the band in the summer of 1995 after 24 years of service since Nursery Crime, in one of the greatest feats in progressive rock, take on lead vocal duties after Peter Gabriel left, while carrying the group into success they never dreamed of. Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks were left as a duet for the first time in their Genesis career. Now, it's a miracle Collins didn't leave the band back in the 80s when his own career skyrocketed, so we gotta give him props for loyalty. By 1995, it was a different game, and both Rutherford and Banks knew this was always a possibility. And then there was no early day Anthony Phillips, no Steve Hackett, nobody but themselves. Mike and Tony carried on and started to write material in early 1996. Bits and pieces took the shape of songs, which created a problem in the nearby future. It was blindfolded songwriting, not knowing who their new singer would be, thus altering the composition process of the past. An official Genesis press release was made until March 28, 1996, sharing the sad news with the music world. Meanwhile, Mike and the Mechanics toured a UK March through May, plus 2 dates in Germany. Phil Collins kept himself busy working on his 8th studio album, Dance Into the Light, whose recording began in 1995 and extended well into 1996. The record was produced by Collins and Hugh Patcham, who came back after Phil's 1989 But Seriously and Genesis Invisible Touch. Back at the Genesis laboratory, Rutherford and Banks made a list of singers they liked to audition. As you know, this is mainly a Led Zeppelin YouTube channel, so here's an interesting Robert Plant connection to the story. Let's begin with one of his 1993 guitarists, Kevin McMichael. As we all know, he was a member of the Cutting Crew of I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight fame. From that same band, we have singer Nick Van Eede, who auditioned for Genesis, but Mike and Tony felt his voice didn't have enough high-range power. Now let's go back to Robert Plant 1993 and his other guitarist, Francis Dunnery. He auditioned for Genesis as well. While Dunnery himself admits he can sing like Peter Gabriel, quote, better than Peter Gabriel, I just couldn't do Phil Collins. All that screaming on mama? No way. Singing Genesis is all about the phrasing. You don't add blues because it's like classical music. So I knew I wouldn't get it, but I wasn't about to turn down the chance to go to the Genesis studio, sit there, and sing The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And you know what? I believe I was the best man for the job, because I'm creative enough to make Tony Banks angry. I wouldn't back down to any of those guys because I'm incredibly creative, probably more than they are. Genesis' wishes were fulfilled for Francis Dunnery, as he played on Hackett's Genesis Revisited 2, released in 2012. Francis' chops can be heard on Supper's Ready and Dancing with the Moonlit Night. Fun fact, Phil Collins' son Simon played on this album as well. Next candidate on the Genesis audition process was David Longdon, who became a part of Big Big Train, recording fine progressive rock albums between 2009 and 2022. He came close to getting the job, like really close. David worked as a songwriter in the UK for Ronder Music. He had a co-worker by the name of Gary Brumham, who was a part of the Big Blue. The band recorded their album at the farm, with Nick Davis as co-producer. So Brumham played one of Longdon's songs to Nick Davis, who liked it, and sent this to Tony Banks, who also liked it, and then sent it to Mike Rutherford. Genesis manager Tony Smith reached out to David for an audition at the farm. Allegedly, Paul Carrick from Mike and the Mechanics wanted to audition, but the idea didn't go through. All candidates sang to the band's album mixes with Phil's vocals muted, but they could hear Phil's backing vocal stuff. Auditions began on May 30th, 1996. David Longdon sang No Son of Mine, I Can't Dance, Mama, Throwing It All Away, Tonight Tonight, Turn It On Again, In the Cage, and Land of Confusion. Longdon was also asked to improvise some music with Mike and Tony to see if he could come up with melodies. Now, while the Genesis hits demand high-range vocals, the new Calling All Stations songs were much lower, hinting a change in direction. David sang on many of the new cuts, still under working titles, and his voice resembled Peter Gabriel more than Phil Collins. 5 sessions were held between May through November 1996, including him performing with his own band at the time, the Gift Horse, so the Genesis camp could watch him on stage. Besides the musical requirements, both Tony and Mike looked for a singer who could deal with the pressure of the public exposure that came with taking the job as frontman for Genesis. On this matter, Ray Wilson had the Stiltskin experience under his belt. David Longdon was given the sad news in November 1996. Tony Banks sent a Christmas card and Mike Rutherford called him up. Ray Wilson got the job. Now before we move on, there's another singer on the list. If you're into progressive rock, the name Kevin Gilbert rings a bell. One of the best American musicians in the history of the genre. His creative output produced such treasures as Toy Matinee and his solo works as well. One of his bands, Giraffe, regrouped in 1994 and played Progfest that year. Their set list included cuts from Genesis' The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. The drummer in that band was a nowadays household name in Prague, Nick DeVirgilio, who was also playing with Tears for Fears at the time. Kevin Gilbert told about Nick about Phil Collins' departure from Genesis and how he should audition for drumming duties. DeVirgilio sent Spock's Beer debut recorded back in 1994. 6 months later, producer Nick Davis called him up for a jam session at the farm with Tony and Mike. Nick got the studio job and recorded 4 tracks for Calling All Stations. Fun fact, Nick DeVirgilio is also a member of Big Big Train and recorded several albums with David Longdon. Now, there was never an audition with Kevin Gilbert, but manager Tony Smith reached out to his manager and said he could audition with Genesis if he wanted to. Rutherford and Banks were, quote, amused by Giraffe's Lamb Lies Down on Broadway performance, but no further actions were taken from their end. I don't think they were intimidated by Gilbert's genius, but him playing Peter Gabriel's parts put Kevin in the same range camp as all the other singers they auditioned, thus making Ray Wilson stand out so much. Also, there's the fact that Kevin was a one-man team and they already had that experience, right? So how did the Genesis camp find out about Wilson? Well, Tony Banks listened to some Stiltskin songs. He probably saw the Levi Strauss ad. It was a tough job as Genesis' new songs were in a lower range and their live show required a higher range frontman. As we will see, this created problems on stage. Sessions for Calling All Stations began on January 1997, with Ray Wilson on vocals. No official press release was made until June while the band worked on the new album. Drummer Nir Zidkiaho, or Nir Z, was called into the studio next to Nick DeVirgilio. Nir Z played on most of the songs from the album. His career was still in its early stage at the time and really took off as session player past the year 2000. His hard and heavy attack played an important role on Calling All Stations. Because there is little, and let me emphasize, little available information on the exact dates the songs were recorded, I will provide a quick summary of the musical styles of each number. All tracks are credited Banks and Rutherford, except 3 cuts: Not About Us, Small Talk, and There Must Be Some Other Way, credited to Banks, Rutherford, and Wilson. Production-wise, there seems to be a strong influence of digital products available at the time, and like I said before, I can help to think of GoldenEye's Nintendo 64 soundtrack released in late 1997 as reference. Check it out. Calling All Stations opener is a dramatic hard rock piece and the closest thing to Genesis playing metal, led by Mike Rutherford's distortion. It makes sense this was the first song both Mike and Tony wrote for this project. The drums and harmony dynamics seems to be inspired by Led Zeppelin's Kashmir and Queen's Show Must Go On with some elements of innuendo. Ray Wilson carries the weight of the composition, and his vocal performance is the highlight of the album, pushing his high range to the extreme as the song builds up. Track 2, Congo, is the best song on the record. A very catchy chorus and infectious instrumental choices create a vibrant number that, with or without Phil Collins, rocks hard. Track 3, Shipwrecked, is very much a late 90s ballad. While its core elements and vocal performance are passionate, Tony's keyboards are a bit high in the mix, making the track's length a minute too long. Alien Afternoon features a great synthesizer intro by Banks. The band comes in with a rhythm and vocal construction reminiscent of the 1983 era of Genesis. Think Just a Job to Do meets Illegal Alien. At 7 minutes and 51 seconds, it's the second longest track here, with a closing section similar to 1991's Fading Lights. Track 5, Not About Us, is one of the best acoustic songs from the 90s. Say what you want about this, but it remains one of Ray Wilson's most important contributions to the Genesis songbook, and quite a fitting track in the Phil Collins departure aftermath. This could have been recorded by many 90s pop stars and score a hit single. Track 6, If That's What You Need, it's a good song on the wrong album. This has the We Can Dance sound, thus Ray Wilson's voice doesn't suit the musical backdrop. Track 7, The Dividing Line, carries some of the 1991 vibes, with a percussive-inspired beat where Near Z does his best Phil Collins impersonation. Wilson makes it work with a confident vocal performance, but it could have been a shorter piece. The element of repetition worked much better live, on stage. Track 8, Uncertain Weather, feels like another We Can Dance sketch. Track 9 sounds like 1997 Genesis, featuring a catchy guitar and keyboard riff to a 4x4 solid groove that sounds like a variation of Stevie Wonder's Superstition. The chorus is not very inspired, but the ending is worth listening to with headphones. By the time you reach track 10, I'll just say it, it's a long record, but it seems every classic band at the time wanted to make the best use of CD space. There Must Be Some Other Way has some of those James Bond sounds I mentioned before. It's a crunch time number with a heavy dose of Banks' wall of synths, Wilson's raspy voice, and Rutherford holding the glue together. Closing track, One Man's Fool, is the longest one on the record, with several sections like 1991's Fading Lights. It seems Fading Lights inspired a lot of these songs. You gotta give it to Near Z. His Collins-inspired drumming, it's definitely the highlight on this number. While Wilson sings his heart out, his register can sometimes be lost in the music because of Tony Banks' synthesizers. Now this is where the studio recording story gets very interesting. A set of 6 B-sides remain technically unreleased, as we have no expanded edition of Calling All Stations at the time of making this video. Track 1, Fret, is a happy instrumental that again sounds like We Can Dance material. Track 2, The Banjo Man, should have been on the album. The music here is quite catchy. Track 3 is filled with a lot of electric guitars, and this also should have been on the final selection. Why Banks and Rutherford left these out beats me. This sounds modern and Wilson's voice works great with rock and roll. Track 4, Papa He Said, is a sped up version of Genesis' I Can't Dance. It's a lighthearted song that should have been on the album. Calling All Stations looks like a bad case of track selection. The next number, Anything Now, is classic Genesis material. What the hell, Banks and Rutherford? Were these tracks saved for later, in case Phil Collins returned? Shame on you guys. This was so much better than some of the ballads you went for. Last track, 7/8, is in, you guessed it, an odd-time signature of 7/8, and yeah, it should have made final cut. It sounds like a new age version of Fifth of Firth, but it works. Maybe the title for this documentary should be The B-Sides Are Better Than the Album. Ray Wilson could only watch Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford go for commercial potential over the musical construction that made Genesis great. But wait, there's another unreleased track, Nowhere Else to Turn. A good melody and strong chorus with uplifting keyboard arrangements. This also should have been on the album.
We had, I have to say, a very creative period. We wrote lots and lots of stuff, a lot more than what's on the record at the moment, actually. We've only written 1 or 2 happy songs in our career, and maybe we'll write a few more, but they're not on this album.
There's so much you could be happy about, though, you know. Terrible thought what would happen if you guys finally got to be happy as the album mere. It took 6 weeks for them to call back. I mean, what's wrong with these guys?
Yeah, well, you know, they're busy.
A message to the Genesis camp. Please release these tracks. The world needs to know the truth on what could have been a much better swan song. While Genesis wrapped up a recording for the new album, Phil Collins played 17 promotional dates in 1996, both radio and television. By 1997, Phil embarked on the Trip into the Light World Tour of 74 shows covering North America and Europe. It was not the best preamble for his former Genesis bandmates, as he took his signature chops on the road to hungry audiences that embraced his solo career in full. Calling All Stations artwork was done by Design Studio Wherefore Art. Among their notable works, there's Phil Collins' Serious Hits Live, Eric Clapton's From the Cradle, Chris Isaak Wicked Game, a Tony Banks collab, I Wanna Change the Score, Tony Banks' third solo album, Still, Mike and the Mechanics Hits, and Phil Collins' Dance into the Light. Past a recording of Calling All Stations, Genesis faced their biggest challenge, touring. touring without Phil Collins, that is. Rehearsals began in September of 1997 at both Working Men's Club in Chiddingfold, close to the Forum, and Bray Film Studios in Windsor. This name may be familiar for Led Zeppelin fans, as the band's last ever rehearsals in September 1980 were held here. Besides Rutherford, Banks, and Wilson, the band was made up of Nir Z and Irish musician Anthony Drennan on guitar and bass. So what happened to the previous Genesis contributors? Well, Daryl Stuermer was working with Phil Collins, and Chester Thompson's condition to reprising his drumming role was to become a full-time member of Genesis, which was turned down by the camp. I feel bad for Chester, performing with these guys since 1977. He played a major role in their live concert experience, but it makes you think why such full-time position hadn't been offered yet, and why Thompson decided to push for this once Phil Collins was gone. A string of 5 promotional shows were booked August through December 1997. The set list features 6 numbers from Calling All Stations, Duke and Weekend Dance with 1 song each, Foxtrot's Ambitious, Supper's Ready, Invisible Touch was represented with the title track and Land of Confusion, and then there were 3 had Follow You, Follow Me, 1983's self-titled album had Mama, and Sending England by the Pound had Dancing with the Moonlit Night. The hit songs on the set list were no surprise, but the old songs were a nice return to the roots. Now, many songs had to be played in a lower key to fit Ray Wilson's voice and hope for the best reaction from fans. A North American tour was booked for November 1997, but all 27 dates were cancelled due to low ticket sales. They tried to relaunch it, calling all promoters, with 22 concerts, and the same thing happened. Phil Collins played 37 shows in North America earlier that year. Maybe North American audiences were not ready for the new guy, who was officially announced as the singer for Genesis on June 1997. 3 promotional videos were released in support of all 3 singles from Calling All Stations: Shipwrecked, Not About Us, and the futuristic Mad Max meets Waterworld inspired visuals of Congo. The story brings us to August 26, 1997 in Berlin for the VH1 acoustic show and the infamous host. Despite the heavy expectations on the band, the set was surprisingly good. Not About Us sounds much better in the unplugged format, and you wish Genesis played one of those MTV specials. You can feel Ray Wilson's heartfelt vocals, owning the stage like the commanding frontman he could be. I sense Mike Rutherford was not comfortable in this setting. The media void left by Phil Collins was huge, and I don't think he was ready for it. Tony Banks, on the other hand, looked excited in his own way, and it was an opportunity to shine without Phil. Ray Wilson handled the annoying host like a pro, and the Scotsman he is. 1991's No Son of Mine was next, and this song was played one full step down, going from E to D, so Wilson could hit the very demanding vocals. Now, this 1997 version is just as powerful as any previous attempts, with Ray Wilson making great use of space and phrasing. To some extent, it sounds like Trespass Peter Gabriel singing 90s Genesis. Third track was an excerpt of the band's epic 1972 masterpiece, Supper's Ready, played in the original key, thus confirming Ray Wilson made for a fine Gabriel tone. Where Phil Collins always felt like he was trying to Gabriel himself through the old numbers, Ray Wilson didn't want to be nobody but himself, and this made it work past any copycat band comparisons. Closing number, Turn It On Again, had a reverse situation. Wilson had a tough time playing this Phil Collins era track, and they didn't play it in a lower key because that would make Rutherford's open chord movement on the guitar quite difficult. Ray doesn't look comfortable here, as opposed to the Gabriel era stuff, and that's okay because Wilson's vocal persona is more introspective and crunch sounding than Collins' nasal tone. Where 1976 Genesis could replace Peter with Phil, their commercial success was dependent on Collins' sound. 1997's promotional tour ended with a visit to RTL Studios in Paris. First impressions were positive towards the Calling All Stations material and the Genesis songs that were either downtuned to fit Ray's voice or were Peter Gabriel era tracks.
This is your big moment, the first time live in front of an audience, right?
No.
It's an international European audience, so do this in 8 languages quickly.
I'll do it in Scottish.
I'm looking forward to it.
That's the one I did.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
How did you actually get involved with him? Was he on a long list, or was he immediately the guy you said, we like Scotsman?
Well, we do, which is handy, but no, actually what happened was the band rose in before Stiltskin. Someone from Virgin sent the CD down, and along with a lot of other tapes and stuff. We heard some of the stuff on the Stiltskin CD, which sounded great. You know, that kind of dark, heavy quality he's got on his voice, and so he came down and auditioned, and the process began.
You're the drummer on the record, you're going to be the drummer on the tour. Let me just ask you one question. Are you the fourth member of the band?
I'm part of the band in the sense of recording and live shows, put it that way.
Well, it's a beautiful drum kit that you brought with you, Nizzy. I'm looking forward to hearing the table later on, yes? Exactly.
I think the first time we heard him, we were really impressed by his voice. He had a sort of all the promise that was shown on the Stiltskin album seemed to come out, really.
I have to say this because I love the irony of this situation. I haven't said I'm going to say this to you, but like, we're talking about Stiltskin. Stiltskin had a huge hit with a song that was used for a commercial for jeans, and Genesis, with their last album, had a huge hit with a record that was basically a parody of people selling jeans on television. I think it's... what would you have done if you'd not got the job?
There was no doubt about that.
He's not singing it like Phil Collins, he's singing it better almost than Phil Collins. I'm getting goosebumps listening to that. Beautiful performance from Ray Wilson. Can you dance?
No.
Do you want to do a few steps with me?
No.
No?
I'll give you a hug.
Give me a hug, all right. Kann nicht tanzen. If you want me to dance later, I will, but not on TV live. Okay. Before we hear the song, which is a song, or a bit of a song that Peter Gabriel used to sing, any plans for a solo record, Ray?
Yeah, just after this evening's performance, that was the get the exposure. Yeah, I mean, I will obviously pursue my own career as well. I think that's the tradition of Genesis, that everybody does that, and
1998 had just 9 Phil Collins live shows in the last months of the year, thus the perfect setting for a Genesis European tour of 47 dates, January through May. Also touring some European countries at the time were Page and Plant on their last tour. Now let's take a look at the songs Genesis prepared to take on the road. We have 7 cuts from the new album, including The Dividing Line, which made great use of the live setting, 4 tracks from Invisible Touch, 4 numbers from Genesis, including Mama. We Can Dance had 3 obligatory hits. Selling England by the Pound had the 2 best songs from the album. A big surprise were 2 cuts from The Lamb in its regular format as opposed to the old medley arrangement from 1992. Then we have the other 2 hits that have to be there and a short version of Supper's Ready. This is a video summary from this tour.
Dzień dobry, Katowice. Calling all stations. get out. There's no need to look outside to see or feel the rain. Can't you see what you have done? As I try to pass another lonely sleepless night, out on the windows, millions of ordinary people. You gotta go, might as well be shaken. I'm helpless and alone, drifting out to sea. Can you tell me where my country lies? Set the uniform to its true love's eyes. It lies with me, cried the queen of maybe. For her merchandise, he traded in his prize. Citizens of hope and glory, time goes by. It's the time of your life. Easy now, sit you down, chewing through your wimpy dreams. They eat without a sound, digesting England by the pound. Follow you, will you follow me? All the days and nights that lit. Hey, mate, with your guardian eyes. But I cannot believe you have me, mama, 'cause it's getting so hard. I need somebody. Can I get in it? What is your name? Martha. Martha. Samantha. A round of applause for Samantha. Come on! Everybody. God bless, good night.
Past Genesis European tour of 1998, the band was put on hiatus until 2007, and Ray Wilson was thanked for his services. Kinda. There was no more news from the Genesis camp. Nothing. It was over. Wilson has expressed some regret over taking the lead vocalist position in Genesis, and it's understandable because of its short-lived duration. For a musician like him who was finding solid ground in the business, it was the chance of a lifetime, and then just a memory, a bittersweet memory. For all the narrow-minded Genesis fans who criticized the living hell out of Wilson, it wasn't his fault. He was a great team player and a fast learner who ended up in the unfortunate and unfair category of a temporary replacement like Julian Turner was in Deep Purple. Banks and Rutherford navigated the ship and decided for a voluntary shipwreck without further taking the project into new grounds, plus revisiting more Peter Gabriel era numbers. But of course, doing such a thing went in opposite direction to the band's commercial identity. I guess there's no going back to the roots. Their massive appeal was built on one man, one vision, one serious hitmaker, Phil Collins. Calling all stations was like trying to make Trespass after Duke, an uphill battle of mainstream success versus taking chances. You can only go into the unknown once, it seems. I want to dedicate this video to Ray Wilson's brave run carrying the Genesis torch in 1997 and 1998. He gave it all on stage and convinced 525,000 record buyers to send him to the Congo, where he's free to leave, and there's always somewhere anybody can lead. Thank you very much for watching. Until the next time, bye bye.